New York City is built on secrets. Beneath the bustling streets, past the familiar subway stations packed with commuters, lies an entirely different world, a network of forgotten tunnels, sealed-off platforms, and places that were never meant to be discovered. I've always been drawn to these places. As an urban explorer, I've ventured into countless abandoned buildings, factories, and underground passageways, documenting the eerie remnants of places time forgot. But nothing I'd ever seen compared to what we found beneath the city. It all started with a message from Ethan, a fellow explorer and an old friend. His text was simple, but it sent a shiver of excitement down my spine. I found something. An abandoned subway station, not on any map, marked as restricted zone. We need to check this out. I was intrigued but skeptical. Over the years, I had seen my fair share of so-called hidden locations, only to find they were just old maintenance tunnels or decommissioned platforms. But then Ethan sent me a photo. It was dimly lit, grainy, but unmistakably real. A station sign covered in layers of dust and grime. The letters were faded, but I could make out part of a name, Hirsch Station. That's when my curiosity turned to obsession. I searched every archive I could find, old subway maps, transit history reports, even obscure conspiracy forums. There was nothing. No record of a station by that name, no mention of its construction or closure. It was as if the place had never existed. That night, we met at a small diner in Brooklyn to discuss the plan. Ethan had brought along Mia, a historian, specializing in New York's underground architecture, and Derek, another urban explorer, though he was more of a skeptic than a believer. Ethan wasted no time. He pulled out an old newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. It was from the 1960s. A small article buried in the back pages, mentioning a proposed subway expansion that was never completed. The station, originally planned for Church Street, was abruptly abandoned. The project was quietly shut down due to unforeseen complications. Mia leaned in, scanning the article. "I've heard of this before," she said. "During the Cold War, the government used hidden subway lines for classified operations. They moved spies, prisoners, even nuclear material through the tunnels." Derek scoffed. "Come on, you think they built an entire station for that?" Mia shrugged. "It wouldn't be the first time." Ethan then pulled out his phone and showed us a satellite map of the subway system. It showed every known station, every track, every access point. But where Church Station should have been, there was nothing, just an empty void. Derek frowned. "That doesn't make sense. If they built it, there should be something there." Ethan smirked. "Exactly. That was all I needed to hear. We had to see it for ourselves." Before heading underground, we decided to ask around, see if any locals had ever heard of the station. At a small corner store near the supposed entrance, we approached the shop owner, an old man with deep wrinkles and tired eyes. At the mention of the station, he froze. His expression darkened. "That place," he muttered. "It's not a station, it's a mistake." We pressed for details, but he shook his head. "They sealed it off for a reason. People went in. They didn't come out." Another customer, a woman in her 70s, overheard and approached us hesitantly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "If you go down there, you won't come back the same." I chuckled nervously. "Why? Is it haunted?" She didn't smile. "No, it's worse than that." Her words stayed with me as we made our way to the entrance Ethan had discovered. The access point was hidden behind an old, rusted maintenance door in an alleyway. Surprisingly, it wasn't locked. The second we stepped inside, the air changed. The distant hum of the city faded, replaced by an eerie, hollow silence. The deeper we descended, the colder it became. The walls were lined with rusted pipes, their surfaces slick with condensation. Our flashlights flickered as we moved through the narrow tunnel, the light barely cutting through the thick darkness ahead. After what felt like an eternity, We finally saw it, a massive metal door covered in layers of dust and grime. Someone had spray-painted "Stay Out" in faded red letters across it. Derek turned to Ethan, his voice uneasy. "Still think this is just an abandoned station?" Ethan grinned. Only one way to find out. He reached for the door handle, and then something knocked from the other side. For a long, paralyzing moment, none of us moved. The knock had been faint, subtle, almost hesitant, but unmistakably real. The kind of sound that didn't belong in a place that had supposedly been abandoned for decades. My breath caught in my throat as I exchanged a look with Ethan. He was the first to snap out of it, his usual overconfidence barely masking the unease creeping into his expression. Mia took a step back, gripping her flashlight tighter. Derek, ever the skeptic, muttered under his breath, "Probably just an echo, or rats." But we all knew better. Ethan's fingers hovered over the metal handle. "We came this far," he whispered. "Might as well see what's inside." Everything in me screamed, "Don't." But curiosity is a hell of a drug. With a slow, deliberate movement, Ethan twisted the handle. The metal groaned, protesting, resisting, but it wasn't locked. That fact alone sent a fresh wave of dread through me. The door creaked open, revealing a pitch-black corridor beyond. A damp, musty scent rushed out, mixed with something else, something I couldn't immediately place. A metallic tang, like rust or blood. Mia swallowed hard. "Smells like something died in there." Ethan flicked his flashlight forward, cutting through the darkness. Dust particles floated in the stale air, disturbed for the first time in what must have been years. The passage ahead was unnaturally narrow, the walls pressing in as if they had been constructed hastily, with no concern for space. Then we saw them faint, smudged handprints along the walls, barely visible beneath layers of grime. Some looked child-sized. Others were larger, the fingers oddly elongated, as if they had been dragged across the surface. Mia gasped. "No way! Someone's been here!" Derek hesitated. "Or someone's still here." We stepped inside. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped. I could see my breath in the beam of my flashlight, though the tunnel ahead revealed no vents, no airflow, nothing that could explain the sudden chill. Then we heard it. A faint, rhythmic clicking sound coming from deeper within the tunnel. It echoed off the walls, impossible to pinpoint. Click, click, click. Mia's breathing turned shallow. "Tell me that's not footsteps." Ethan pressed forward, but I noticed something was off about the ground beneath us. The tiles weren't aligned like a normal subway floor. They looked warped, uneven, as if the entire passage had shifted over time. Some were cracked, revealing something beneath them. I crouched down, brushing away debris. That's when I saw it. Tracks. Not subway. Tracks! These were smaller, rusted beyond recognition, partially buried under years of dust. They led deeper into the tunnel, vanishing into the darkness. Ethan frowned. Why would there be tracks here? Mia's voice was barely above a whisper. Because this wasn't just a station. A sudden clang from behind us sent my heart into my throat. We spun around. The metal door had slammed shut. Derek lunged for the handle, twisting and yanking, but it wouldn't budge. "Guys," his voice was strained. "We have a problem." The clicking sound grew louder, closer. Click, click, click. It wasn't footsteps. It was something tapping on the walls, the handprints, the elongated fingers. My mind raced as realization hit. These weren't marks left by past explorers. They were fresh. Someone or something had just made them, and it was still here. The tapping stopped. A silence so heavy, it felt like the air had thickened around us. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move. The only sound was our own shallow, uneven breathing. Then the smell hit me. It wasn't just the dampness of old, concrete and rusted metal anymore. It was decay, a thick, putrid stench, like something had been rotting in the dark for years. My stomach turned and I had to fight the urge to gag. Mia covered her nose with her sleeve, her eyes wide with horror. Derek was still jerking the handle of the metal door. "It won't open," he hissed. "It's like something's holding it shut from the other side." Click, click, click. The tapping sound resumed. But this time, it wasn't distant. It was right behind us. Ethan swung his flashlight back toward the tunnel. The beam cut through the dust-heavy air, illuminating the old tracks beneath our feet. But just beyond the reach of the light, the darkness shifted. A figure stood there. No, not stood. It was hunched, its elongated limbs pressed against the walls, fingers dragging along the surface, creating the tapping sound. Its head tilted unnaturally to the side, as if observing us, waiting. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its eyes. Derek sucked in a sharp breath. "What the hell is that?" Mia whimpered. "We need to go. Now." Ethan took a cautious step back, and the thing moved. Not like a person, not like anything I had ever seen. It scuttled along the wall like an insect, its fingers scraping against the concrete as it shifted closer, never fully revealing itself, always staying just at the edge of our flashlights. That's when I noticed something else. The tunnel was breathing. The air around us expanded and contracted in slow, rhythmic pulses, as if the entire space was alive. The walls groaned, and a deep guttural sound echoed through the darkness. "We have to follow the tracks," I whispered. "It's the only way out." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Go, move." We ran. The old tracks beneath us clanked and rattled under our weight, broken metal shifting beneath our boots. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, the air growing thicker, heavier with each step. And behind us, it followed. I could hear it skittering, the sickening sound of nails scraping metal. It was fast, too fast. Every time I risked a glance back, it was still there, always just beyond the light, moving in short, jerky bursts. The tunnel walls narrowed, the breathing sound grew louder, and then up ahead, a red light. It flickered weakly, a dying bulb swaying from exposed wires. A rusted subway car sat on the old tracks, its doors partially open. Derek pointed. "There, get inside." Mia was the first to reach it, practically throwing herself into the open doors. Ethan followed, then Derek. I was right behind them, but as I lunged forward, I felt something grab my ankle. Cold, bony fingers wrapped around me, yanking me back toward the darkness. I screamed, kicking wildly. Ethan reached out, grabbing my arm just in time, pulling me into the subway car. The doors slammed shut behind me, and outside, in the flickering red glow, the thing just stood there, not moving, not tapping, just watching. And then it smiled. The subway car smelled of rust and something foul, something old and rotting. The flickering red light from outside barely illuminated the interior, casting long, distorted shadows against the cracked windows. The seats were torn open, their stuffing spilling out like exposed organs. Dust and grime coated every surface. We weren't alone. Mia's breath hitched. Oh my God. At first, I thought they were mannequins, figures slumped in the seats, completely still. Their clothes were tattered, their bodies unnaturally thin. The air was thick with the scent of mildew, rust, and something sickly sweet. Then I saw it. Their faces were covered. Each of them had a burlap sack pulled tightly over. Their heads tied at the neck with coarse rope. No movement, no sound. Just silent, faceless passengers. Ethan reached out, hesitating. "Are they dead?" As if in response, one of them twitched. Derek swore under his breath and backed up against the door. "This isn't real. This isn't happening." Mia let out a strangled sob. "We need to get out of here." Ethan stepped forward, gripping one of the burlap sacks. He took a deep breath, then yanked it off. I wish he hadn't. The face underneath was wrong. Unfinished. Like someone had tried to carve out human features but had given up halfway. There were no eyes, just smooth, stretched skin. The mouth was an open, gaping wound, like it had been torn wider than it should be. Something moved inside it. Then the thing breathed, a shuddering, wet gasp that sent a wave of pure, ice-cold terror through me. Ethan stumbled back, his hands covered in something dark and sticky. The faceless thing turned its head toward him with an unnatural, jerky movement. Its chest rose and fell too fast. Then it screamed, a shrill, inhuman wail that filled the subway car, rattling the windows. The other passengers began to stir. The car lurched. We tumbled against the seats as the entire subway train suddenly came to life. The engine rumbled beneath us, metal screeching as the wheels jerked forward on the tracks. "It's moving!" Derek yelled, gripping the pole for balance. The faceless passengers twitched and convulsed, their bodies jerking upright. One of them grabbed Mia's wrist. She shrieked, thrashing wildly, trying to shake it off. Its grip tightened, too strong, too unnatural. The skin on its fingers was dry, splitting open as it clenched her tighter, revealing something dark, pulsing beneath the surface. Ethan and I lunged at her, pulling her free. The thing lurched forward, mouth hanging open in an agonizing wail. The train picked up speed. The windows outside showed nothing but pitch-black tunnels, endless and suffocating. Then, a reflection. I turned to the grimy window and saw something. Standing outside the train, running alongside us, it was the thing from the tunnel. Its long, twisted limbs carried it effortlessly as it kept pace with the subway car, its face pressed against the glass from the outside. No eyes, just smooth, stretched skin. Then in a slow, deliberate movement, it raised a hand and knocked. Click, 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 the same tapping from before. Derek lost it. He ran to the emergency door at the back of the car, trying to force it open. "We need to get out of here now!" But the train was moving too fast, too deep underground, and the faceless passengers were all turning toward us. The subway car was a nightmare of movement and sound. The faceless passengers lurched toward us, their bodies twitching and convulsing with unnatural spasms. Their hands, cold, dry, splitting open at the knuckles, grasped at our arms, our clothes, anything they could reach. The entire train rocked violently, picking up speed, metal screeching as it barreled deeper into the darkness. Mia was sobbing, her breath coming in panicked gasps as she clutched her wrist where one of them had grabbed. Ethan was swinging his flashlight wildly, its weak beam casting jagged shadows of the faceless figures closing in. Derek was at the emergency door, his fingers bleeding as he clawed at the rusted handle. "It won't open!" He slammed his fist against it. "It's locked, it's fucking locked." I turned to the windows, pitch black outside, no stations, no signs, just the endless tunnel swallowing us whole. Then I saw it again, the thing from the tunnel. It was inside the car now. It stood at the far end, hunched and wrong, its elongated limbs twitching as it cocked its head toward us. The smooth skin, where its eyes should have been, seemed to pulse, like something was trying to push through from the inside. Its gaping, too wide mouth hung open, but no sound came. Then, in slow, deliberate movements, it began walking toward us. Click, click, click. Its long fingers drummed against the metal railings as it moved, like it was testing the weight of reality itself. The sound sent a shiver through my spine. I grabbed Mia's hand and pulled her back. "We have to do something!" Ethan's breathing was ragged. He was gripping a rusted metal pipe he'd found beneath one of the seats, holding it like a weapon. "We can't just..." Bang! The lights in the subway car flickered violently. The walls stretched. For a split second, it was like the train wasn't real anymore. The seats, the floor, everything warped, turning into something organic, something alive. The faceless passengers began to whisper, a chorus of low, breathy murmurs, their mouths opening and closing without lips, without sound. Their bodies swayed with the motion of the train. And then all at once they lunged. Ethan swung the pipe, slamming it into one of them with a sickening crunch. The thing stumbled back, but it didn't stop. It didn't even react. The others grabbed at us, their fingers digging into our skin, pulling, dragging us down. Mia screamed as one wrapped its arms around her, forcing her head back, its mouth gaping wide, as if it was trying to swallow her whole. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed the emergency hammer from the glass case near the door and swung it as hard as I could at the nearest window. Crash. Glass exploded outward. Wind howled. Into the car, the force nearly knocking me off my feet. For a split second, I saw the tunnel outside. The walls were streaked with something dark, something that looked like veins, like roots pulsing beneath the concrete. The thing at the end of the car snapped its head toward me. It knew what I was about to do. Too late. I grabbed Mia, and without thinking, I jumped. Everything became a blur of darkness and wind and pain. My body hit the tunnel floor hard, rolling, scraping against the ground as the train roared past me, disappearing into the endless void. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, a sound. Footsteps. I forced myself to look up. Mia was next to me, gasping, clutching her ankle. Ethan and Derek had jumped too. They were groaning, bruised, but alive, and then I saw it. Standing on the tracks, not far from where the train had vanished, was one of the faceless passengers. It had followed us. It stood perfectly still, its head tilted, watching, waiting. The tunnel stretched into infinite darkness behind it. Then it took a step forward. Click, and we ran.